Therapist Thrival Guide, where we cover all of the things that graduate school didn't teach you. Welcome to the Therapist Thrival Guide. My name is Miranda Barker. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am here with Dr. Lucas Volini, LMFT.
Hello.
And he is also a...
corporate sellout.
You did that last time. Try again.
No, I said I sell franchises last time.
Okay, I'm going to never
And I'm not wearing a
that.
hat today. I think this is the first time.
That's true. No wonder you look so different today.
Yeah.
That's right. What happened to your Newsies hat?
I don't know. Just lost interest.
And I think that means that your girlfriend maybe hid it.
No. No, she has been known to hide some of my clothing items. Necessarily.
Yeah.
But no, she was cool with the hat.
Huh. Well, that's good. Shout out to Kirsten.
Yeah.
All right. Today we are joined by two special guests. We have Brittany and Brad. Brittany, you might recognize from our episode all about suicide prevention and working with clients that have suicidal ideation. And then Brad is here, first time on the podcast. Glad you're here.
Yay, thank you.
Today we are talking about groups. And so I wanted to pull these two in for this episode because Brad has a lot of experience facilitating treatment groups and Brittany has a lot of experience with facilitating support groups. So I wanted to kind of talk through these different dynamics, these different ideas, if there's structure, answer all of the questions that y'all have about
and
group
I love
facilitation.
group therapy.
Do you?
Do you?
Oh, yeah. I think group therapy is
Like as a participant or a facilitator?
Both. Like if I were to go to therapy and there was an option to do a good old-fashioned adult encounter group, I'd sign up for that.
What does that mean, adult encounter group?
Like just the basis of group therapy was bringing a group of 6 to 8 adults together that are all wanting to improve upon some sort of situation, and you just do group therapy with them.
Because when you say adult encounters, it just reminds me of the Craigslist section where it's like, what is that?
You're thinking
Something
of casual
creepy.
encounters.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was a thing, Barker. But I think
Too many Lifetime movies.
Maybe can I just start off?
I've never seen it.
I need to get this out because I'm a huge fan of group therapy. I think like Irvin Yalom's book, The Theory and Practice of Group Counseling, is one of the most brilliant books ever written throughout the entire spectrum of literature within this profession. And what I love about group therapy has a lot to do with what I hate about individual therapy. And what I hate about individual therapy is when you show up to therapy as an individual, you portray whatever version of your life you want to, whether that's consciously or unconsciously. And there's no aspect of the other people in your life kind of holding you accountable, or not even holding you accountable as much as like reflecting you back to yourself, because we can only know ourselves so well, especially when it comes to the effect we have on people we're in a relationship with. And so one of my favorite theories or principles of group therapy is with individuals, because you can create whatever version of reality you want in your individual therapy, if the therapist tries to challenge you with something or put something in front of you that you're not yet willing to accept, it's super easy to just be like, well, that's just one therapist. They don't know what they're talking about. Maybe they'll fire you. Maybe they'll just avoid it. Or maybe they'll withhold information, that might go closer to it. What happens in group therapy is, well, one, you build cohesion. So you get the whole group, to build trust with each other and with the facilitator. And then once trust is built by self-disclosure. So the more people in the group self-disclose, the more cohesion there's going to be. What starts to happen in that process, which is brilliant, is in order to earn your way into the cohesion of the group, you need to self-disclose and show them enough of yourself. So for the people who like to give feedback and will show up to group every week and be really engaged at the level of feedback, if they're not returning the vulnerability of opening it up, the group will start to mistrust them. Yeah. And so now you have enough of a sense of belonging to where, it's like, if I want to stay here, I should start opening it up. So it could be a powerful tool to help people work through those vulnerabilities once they see other people demonstrating the courage it takes to be truly vulnerable in a group setting. But the real magic of it is when an individual needs to hear something along the lines of critical feedback, something they do that's problematic that they haven't been able to take ownership of yet. Again, if it was just an individual saying it to them, it's easy to discount the individual. But when you're in a group where your personality has fully manifested into the dynamics of the group, and one person in the group gives you feedback, and your initial response is, well, what do they know? That's just one piece of feedback. But then when every other member of the group chimes in and says, like, no, like, that's how we experience you too. It's like, there's no running from that. At that point, it's like, you cannot do anything but come to accept whatever it is that they're telling you. But because the facilitator built a group of trust and cohesion, it's like, as difficult as it is for that person to come to terms with it, they're doing it in an environment where they're loved and supported. Yeah. And so I think some of the most brilliant occurrences of change and growth can happen in group therapy in ways that it can't happen in any other treatment setting.
I love that, Lucas. What could you say that book again that you mentioned?
The Theory and Practice of Group Psychotherapy by the OG of existentialism, Irvin Yalom.
Awesome. I'll link to it in the description. I've never even heard of that book.
What?
So I know. No, that sounds awesome. So I appreciate you sharing all of that. I think that gives us such a good foundation to step into this conversation with. So I'm wondering if we can turn it on our guests and ask you guys to share a little bit about the groups you have experience facilitating.
You want to start, Brad?
Sure. So most of my background is in facilitating groups in substance use treatment centers. I started in about 2012 when I was an intern in working toward my license, my LADC. And I did all 880 hours at Vinland National Center. They specialize in working with people with traumatic brain injuries and substance use concerns. And so that's the bulk of my group, is all substance use focused. And I did that for probably close to 8 years. And then the group work that I do now would be in the classroom, teaching some of the LADC courses.
Awesome. Okay, but before we jump over to Brittany, tell everybody what your experience was with your very first group. How did you get thrown into that?
It was, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was the first day of my second week that I was thrown into group.
Of an internship.
At an internship. And I just remember I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I had stuff, but I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've just been observing and, going into a room full of probably 18 people at the time. They all know I'm an intern. And I was young, and most of the people I worked with were probably at least 10 years older than me, client-wise. Yeah. But I think it was actually one of the best things for me, because my own anxieties would have put it off.
No, I love that. Brittany?
And that's not to say that supervisors should do that to their interns.
No.
Yeah.
I think there's
you found your way.
A process that we can do.
Yeah.
Good note.
And oddly enough, I think I started my group experience my second or third week of my first internship in my master's program. But I talked a little bit about it last time I was on the podcast, and how being in that survivors of suicide support group for the first time that night is what made me go into the field of suicidology. So it was really powerful for me, a little bit different than your experience. So, I have mainly facilitated support groups, psychoeducational groups, and then I also teach a class on group work at the master's level. So I've done a few different types within each of the categories. Survivors of suicide, children's bereavement. I've done a lot of postvention suicide work. And then right now we have a support group for law enforcement officers in the Twin Cities area.
Awesome. So we have so much experience here. I want to talk a little bit about methods that you use in your group and like structuring groups, that sort of stuff. And then I want to jump into some of like the frequently asked questions or like frequent fears when it comes to facilitating groups. So let's start with Brad. Would you want to share a little bit more about like the method that you've kind of adapted and that you use with your groups?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think just to give some context, so obviously when I was in school, we were getting some education on group work, right? We were prepared that we were going to need to do it because in the LADC world, if you're working in a treatment center, I would say about half of your job, if not more, is group work. Especially if you're going to work in a residential or intensive outpatient. And so there is some preparation, but I think, at least for me, like the I'm forgetting the word, but like the educational side versus the reality of the job is much different, right? And so I don't remember feeling super prepared going into that. That's why I do think it was helpful to kind of throw me in and just do it. And in the places that I worked, there didn't seem to be much structure other than that there was a schedule. You know, the clients needed to adhere to the schedule. And a lot of that's related to statutory requirements. They have to be in X amount of hours of activity group, of psychoeducation, of lecture, in order to be able to bill, especially for residential. But the context of what was in those groups didn't always have structure. And I remember for me that felt kind of chaotic and hard. Like, what am I grasping onto here other than finding things that either people have given me as resources or that I'm finding on my own and just kind of applying it. And it felt like we could do more to support the clients if we could have more structure and understanding of what actually we're all doing together. Because I remember times, I was sharing this with Miranda when we were kind of talking about this, I remember times where it was like, I would take, a decent chunk of time to prepare for a group and feel like I'm going into this confident, come to find out again in the group and they're like, we did this last week with another counselor, the same exact thing. And I'm like, oh, well, I thought this was like a brilliant idea. and you've already done it. Now I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I found that kind of started shifting when I changed jobs and was working at an outpatient company, and they were curriculum based. And so it was pretty high structure because they were like, we have to follow this curriculum. This is what we advertise that we do. We're going to use this. There's evidence that supports this works. And I loved it because I was like, I have a base now of what we're going to do for the groups.
And you just described my nightmare.
But we'll get there, right? So that helped me feel more confident to be a facilitator, a supportive facilitator. And then while I was working at this place, I was doing CEUs, and it was an online one. And I was like, this, we know how those go. But this one, I am not kidding. It changed how I show up as a facilitator, and it's so simple. And I wrote down the person's name because I want to make sure that I reference them, because this is not I didn't come up with this, but it was Dr. Anthony Salerno, and it was
Italian.
It was from a 2014 presentation he did on learning to love groups. And the acronym, and maybe you know this from your class, is ROPES. And it's review, overview, presentation, exercise, and summary. And I set up, after I learned about that, I set up all my groups that way, set up my classes that way. And it gives people the structure and understanding of what they're doing, like why are we here, and understanding. And one of the things that I took away from my internship at Vinland and also my history of working with people with disabilities is we need to make sure that we are presenting in different ways, right? For visual learners, for audio learners, I don't know if that's the correct term, but different ways to give the information is important. And then the other kind of piece of that is I never assigned homework. I let the clients choose. And so that was part of the treatment planning process is what are you going to do? They call it in some businesses and stuff, they call it like the action item. What is your action item, right? And that, and always my goal to them was you leave here with an action item that applies to your recovery process. We'll check in on it either in group or we'll check in on it in your individual session. And I created a worksheet based off of the ropes so people could have, a takeaway thing. And adding that structure with flexibility is so important. So we had that, but we also were present with where's the group at today? If this topic isn't exactly where we're at, then how do we allow that flexibility with still some structure was really important because not everybody was there. If we're going to do a check-in and the topic or the theme that's coming up is how do I manage the cravings that I've been having from New Year's, and the topic in the book is something completely different, well, we better address that because that's where they're at. So we still have our structure, but this is what's present, so we need to address that and maybe find a way to bring them together or just ignore that for today and come back later. So I think those are kind of the two important things that I learned was have high structure and allow for flexibility. And then the other one more piece is, because Lucas, you were talking about, we want to have a cohesive group. We want to have a group that trusts each other, and ground rules is so important.
Yeah, establishing group norms.
Exactly. Yeah. And referencing them regularly. Yes. When I did process groups, we talked about them every single time we had a new person come in. And we talked about, do we need to change anything? And then anytime we, the group, or I felt like we were deviating from that, then we would talk about it.
So this is so helpful. So what you're talking about is, and could you do the ropes thing again? You said review.
So it's review, overview, presentation.
What do you mean by presentation?
So presentation, so for example, if I'm coming in with the topic of relapse prevention skills, then I'm going to present on that. Like, what are those? And of course, depending on the group that you're running, I'm not kidding. I used to come in with a stack of resources because I would have it just in case something came up. I always had it, and I rarely needed it, but I had it in case somebody needed this. But so relapse prevention skills, that's such a broad term. And so the presentation, depending on what we were talking about, what do you a lot of people in addiction lost connection to things that they enjoyed. And so it would even just be talking about, what did you like to do for fun? Did you ever have anything that you liked to do for fun? And if not, like, what is something that you're interested in? So that would be the presentation piece is, I think for us, we would maybe think of like a PowerPoint, right? We may associate that with that, but it's really the giving the information, and then the exercise piece is next. How do we apply that? And that can look different depending on what kind of group you're doing. And then summary, making sure we review what are those key points. Like we all probably have some sort of training in motivational interviewing. Give the summary of what you're hearing and what you shared.
This is awesome, Brad. This is really helpful in just kind of understanding how you would structure your treatment groups. Brittany, how do you typically structure your support groups? Because I would imagine there's some similarities, maybe very different.
I think very different.
I think it's so different. And, just sitting here listening to you going, oh, that's my nightmare too. It's just like the highly structured stuff. And what I love about support groups and what I typically say to my students is that if you have a good support group, you can just sit back and watch. And it's so fun because
once you get it there.
Once you get it there.
And that's how you know you're facilitating them well, is when you do start showing up, just to like kind of launch it, and then you kind of sit back and pay attention.
Yeah, but that's the challenge that not a lot of people talk about, because it sounds like you walked into a pre-existing group for your first internship, or it was because it was in a facility.
And oftentimes, if you're coming in as a drug and alcohol counselor, you're probably taking over a caseload.
So that's an ongoing group, which is very different.
And is it like pretty close too? It's the same people that come every time, or is it?
No, anytime a client discharges, you're getting a new one.
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
It's an ongoing group, so there's not an end in sight. It's not like a 12-week group, and then it's open, so anyone new that comes in can come in, which is very different than having a closed group for 12 weeks.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I mean, the dynamics that are there and change throughout can make or break it. You know, in support groups, I always think about going back to the goal. Why is the group happening? Why is it there? And you know, for the survivors of suicide support group, the goal of that group was for individuals bereaved by suicide to receive support from others who had walked in their shoes. And so that's what it was all about. So I mean, if I think about ropes, you know, in a sense, that's what we would do, because we would review anything that came up in the last week, not the nitty-gritty details, because that was also an open group, and we could have people that weren't there the week before, and so we wouldn't want to, you know, share anyone's confidential information, but we would review that, always review the group rules. And then, you know, I think the presentation component is a little bit more of just kind of the free-for-all. You know, where are we at now? What's going on today? The way I like to start really any of the groups I've ever run, and I think about it, I do this when I teach as well, is I always start off and say, is there anyone who needs time today? Like, is there anyone that you're coming in with something that you definitely want to have time to talk about? And so I make sure to note those people and make sure that they get time, because things can easily go down one path, and for the entire time we could be on that path. And it could be exactly what 2 people need, and the other 7 are okay with it that week. And then the next week, the focus is on them. And so it's very much you know, in the moment kind of deciding where things are going to go. I really enjoy being able to tap into what I see in other people. And that's what I think is so fun about it, because it's kind of, you know, sometimes as a therapist and as a person, somebody will say something and you'll have one of those thoughts in your head that should probably stay in your head. And in a group setting, I can look and go, you know, Lucas, I just saw that facial expression that you made when Brad was explaining ropes. Do you have something you want to share about that? And, you know, somebody will do something or get uncomfortable, and you just call them out on it. And if they won't say something, normally somebody else will jump in. And just kind of encouraging them to share their perspective, it's just fun. Like, I love that part of it.
So you've talked a lot about group rules. Do you guys have like a copy or example of rules that you typically use in groups that I could share in the description? Because I think that sometimes it's helpful to just see like, here's what other people are using, here's what other people say. Or do you have anything more you want to say about group rules and how you kind of introduce those?
I mean, I always just open it up to the group first. I say, you know, we need to establish some group rules. This is, you know, for everyone here. So let's just kind of start off. Is there anything that comes into your head right away that you want to establish for this group? And I mean, I think one of the first few things someone always says is confidentiality.
Sure. Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a standard. Being on time, being present. If you're not going to be able to come, letting someone else know. And I think that's a little bit more for closed groups, you know, because typically with a closed group, people have agreed to be part of it for X number of weeks. And so if somebody doesn't show up on week 4, then, you know, we would expect them for someone to check in with them. What else?
That's kind of similar. Be respectful, one person talking at a time, those kind of things.
Keep it collaborative.
Yeah.
When possible, involve the group, and because that's one of the first ways to start building cohesion, belonging and togetherness, is for them to feel a sense of ownership over the space they're creating. But with all of this stuff, just keeping in mind like the context of the treatment setting, and so like when Brad's talking about treatment facilities, I can think of at least 15 good reasons why there's going to be more structure. There just needs to be. When it comes to kind of more open general public support groups, much more flexibility and room for spontaneity and what each closed group becomes as it finds its own identity.
So let's jump into some common fears that people have about facilitating groups, or even if you guys think back to like when you were first starting, some worries that you had. And I'm just going to like kind of spitfire some. I want you all to tell me what you think about some of them. So, or what you would do. Group member is monopolizing all of the time. How do you divert them? How do you approach this?
I think for me, what I learned to do is to address it right away. Because early on, this was something that I needed to practice, because I would let people talk. And I was like, this is upsetting for me. This is upsetting for the other group members. They're not getting anything out of this. Because oftentimes what would end up happening is the person would start telling stories about their life, long stories. And so I think it's important, the way that I found is being able to recognize that their story is important, and this is not maybe necessarily the space to be sharing all of it in. And so kind of pulling out parts of it and giving affirmation and acknowledging that, and then giving direction that, we need to hear from others. And also this is why it's good to have solid ground rules, because you can always go back to that and say, we agreed that this is a group, these are the rules that we agreed on, and we're not following those. So how can we kind of reset and get back into a space where all of us are feeling heard and all of us have an opportunity to share?
Yeah. So then, do you have anything to add, Brittany?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the population and the type of group, too. I can imagine in that situation, there are probably some people who don't want to be there. And that's where I like to use humor. So if it's someone who the first 3 weeks was just pissed off in the corner because they were, in this program they don't want to be, and now they're monopolizing time, that's where I'd be like, well, who would have thought you'd have so much to say? But that's how I really build relationships and rapport. And remember, the population that I work with, first responders and veterans, they like that stuff. I would not be able to do that in a survivors of suicide support group. Right? Like, not the place. But I think that's where you can do some of that stuff. Or when you see someone else's facial expression, that's the time where I'll be like, okay, just a second, because he's about to jump out of his chair over there. What is going on? And I think you have to intersect and be direct about it.
Okay, those are great. That's great.
And I like to be a little sneakier with it, and throw in some paradox, especially when it's the over monopolizer of like feedback. Because there are two different ways to over monopolize. You over monopolize the feedback to other people's disclosures, or you over monopolize through your own disclosures and storytelling. This can work for both, but when someone's really taking up a lot of time, instead of getting involved in the resistance of trying to get them to take up less time, I'll start deferring to them. So like say like Jake, is the over monopolizer of feedback. Someone finishes a disclosure, it looks like Jake was going to take a break on feedback. As soon as I notice him not doing the problematic tendency, I'll be like, well, Jake, what do you have in response for what was just shared?
Why? You're like encouraging them to talk more then.
Yeah, and you push them deeper and deeper into it until they feel so much of the discomfort from monopolizing, the extent to which they've been monopolizing, that then they start to resist you. So like maybe after the third time, Jake would be like, no, I don't have anything to say. And then it's like, great, we made some progress.
That's a good method. I haven't thought of that one. Yeah. That makes sense. All right, what do you do if you have a group member that is just visibly really emotional, needs way more support than you can offer them in a group setting? What do you do?
Oh gosh.
Like in tears, won't stop crying during group.
Can I share? I want to share a group experience
Yeah.
that I did not expect to have in my internship. So first year, and talk about needing more support than you can give in the moment. We had someone who was actively engaging in self-injurious behavior in the group. And the reason we knew about it is because we saw the pool of blood on the floor.
Oh my gosh.
And so that is a clear, you need more
Yeah.
support than can be provided right there. And so in that instance, with the group that we had, I did have a co-facilitator, and we also had some peer leaders. And so I was able to take that person out of the group. I think that's probably the only instance that, and if I had to interject and do a suicide risk assessment in the moment, that I would actually take someone out of the group,
Yeah.
which I think sometimes tends to be the go-to. I'll be curious to see if you say anything different, Brad, but most of the time it's, we focus on it and then we move on as needed. And you give that person the time, but not all of the time. It's okay for them to be visibly sad. And then there's the whole question of, do you pass the tissue box or not?
Yeah. So
Because some people take it as stop crying.
I would never, ever hand a client that's crying a tissue.
Okay.
Keep it within arm's reach. But I do think it absolutely communicates just that. It's like, all right, you're crying, clean yourself up. It shifts them out of the state of accessing that emotion, when my entire method of therapy is to push them as deep into that emotional experience as possible.
Is it different if another group member passes it to him?
Yeah, then it just irritates me.
do you have so this is actually something that I've learned recently is a weird thing that some people I didn't know that
The
passing
Kleenex?
The tissue
I
box?
didn't
Oh,
know
yeah.
that passing a
Yeah.
tissue box is so odd like that, or that people can interpret it that way. But do you also view that in individual therapy?
Oh, yeah. All
That's
therapy.
so interesting.
therapy.
Yeah, from what I was taught, it's often your own discomfort.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So
Watch people, how they respond when people cry.
yeah.
And when I'm crying and someone hands me a tissue, I just smack it right out of my face. Say, get that thing away from me.
Just what I
I'm
expected.
feeling.
Okay, so do you don't do that in group? You're like, no, you can sit in your tears.
I won't pass them, but I do always make sure there's some visible.
Yeah.
In the first group, that survivors group, there was a lot of crying always. And so we had tissue boxes placed in all four corners of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a huge circle that we were all in. And in the very middle of the circle was a little table with a tissue box and a candle, because we lit a candle in the beginning of every session and read the Serenity Prayer, which I didn't even know what it was back then. But that was part of what they do. They recite it together.
It is a wonderful prayer.
Isn't that what they do at the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous too? They read the Serenity Prayer.
Yeah, that's part of
Is
it.
that the
It's in the
prayer I'm
process.
thinking of?
Yep.
Okay.
I would say there's one exception to handing a client a Kleenex.
What's the exception?
They have a
And it's
booger.
when the discharge moves from their eyeballs to their nose, and it becomes such an overwhelming mess that they just need something
Yeah, that
to
makes
at least take care of the nose down.
So then do you tell them? Do you say, let me
I say
be clear?
wipe your nose, but not your eyes.
You say that?
No, I don't say that. I just it's like, all right, you clearly need a Kleenex. This is a disaster. I'm getting some of my germ phobias coming back because you're on the couch in my
Again,
office.
your own discomfort.
Well, yeah, when it comes to snot. Yeah.
When it comes to snot.
Okay, so Brad, how do you
Yeah.
approach someone who's super emotional in a group?
Well, I think kind of like what Brittany was saying. Also, I think it depends on where the group is at, right? I think if in some of my experiences when I've had a really cohesive group, the group takes care of it
Good,
because they
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
they're already picking up on it because something's up with so and so, right? And we take the time and have the space, and then I think as a facilitator, if you're noticing that that's not happening, then I think it's on us to bring some attention to it. And of course, we have to pay attention, right? How is this person responding to me bringing it up? Because I think there's a good balance between what's a good push, right, and what's not, because we don't want them to get defensive and completely close off and potentially leave, but we also want them to work toward that vulnerability and realize that this is an opportunity for you to get support from the group. And so I think acknowledging it and maybe helping start that conversation with some open questions. Also relying on like, we need to be paying attention, like what could have brought that up. You know, maybe we knew there was something going on based on something they shared in their individual with us. And so really being in tune as best as we can to what's going on in their lives and what we may have said or what somebody else may have said or what the topic is of how this could be bringing up these feelings.
And I think we also have to think about the appropriateness of people for a group setting. Not everyone is appropriate for a group setting. And sometimes they might start a group, and it might not be until a few sessions in when you realize, I think they got some shit they need to deal with before they get into a group setting. And so that might be, taking a step back, not just because they were crying in a group session, but I think that's something to consider. And I, in a lot of areas of practice, really like the idea of follow-up and additional support. And so that's where I would consider and look back at the group rules and see if anything was established for follow-up amongst peers. In the survivors of suicide community, they are just so close because, in their experience, no one else has gone through it. That group that they have, that's their support. And so it's sort of just like I'm going to check on you later tonight. But normally in groups like that I've facilitated in the past, that's been a part of that. They've had, a roster of names that they passed around. And so someone might say at the end of the night, hey, are you okay if I check in with you tomorrow? Like if someone's had a rough time. Or it could be just a group norm that at the end of the group, the facilitator could even say, does anybody need a check-in this week? And anybody, do you think you'd benefit from a peer checking in with you? And that's not something as the facilitator that you would do, but it is something that you can promote amongst the group members for them to support each other, which also, fosters them reaching out for help when they need it and providing support for others, which in turn can be helpful for them. So
that's a great idea. I love that. What about if you have group members that are fighting or like about to fight in your group?
Fist fight, like physical fight?
Throw hands.
Oh, well, I mean.
Oh, I didn't even think about this before. Y'all, I had a failed group. I totally forgot about this.
The group failed, or the topic was...
The group failed.
Okay, tell us more.
It failed hard.
You had to abandon.
I had to abandon ship. This was so bad. I was a school-based social worker for a year, and I saw this common problem. I'm like, these 5th grade girls have low self-esteem. And for those of you who are listening or watching, you heard the phrase 5th grade girls and went, that's where that bitch went wrong. Because that's where I went wrong. Sorry, I just got thrown back 12 years thinking about this, and I'm feeling it. I thought it was such a good idea because I saw this common problem. And I'm like, they can come together. Yeah. We can build self-esteem. No, there was a time that one of them literally went after another one in there physically. And that was the time I said, we are disbanding.
So that was what it was like, this is a failure.
Yes, it was a failure. And I learned a lot from it. I did. I had really good intentions. I wasn't ready for it.
So what went wrong?
They all had low self-esteem. My goal for them was to increase their self-esteem. It wasn't their goal. That's not why it's not why any of them were coming to me individually. It was stuff that came up, and it was a theme that I recognized, but none of them came in and were like, I want to build my self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And so
they just wanted to terrorize everybody else's self-esteem.
Basically.
Including yours.
Yeah, that happened.
Probably especially yours.
Yeah. So, I mean, I went with it. It was pretty clear after the first one that it was going to be a no-go. But I said, don't be scared. And I decided to keep going a little bit. And after the third one, oh, yeah, I can see that girl's face. Yeah.
Fist fight.
Yeah, she approached. They did not actually come to fisticuffs. But
you had to get in the middle of them?
Yeah, I did.
You did?
I did.
No.
And what's funny is that we were sitting on the floor in a circle, and like the one girl got up on her knees and started to crawl across, and so then I had to like crawl. That would have been good for someone to watch.
Wow.
That's when popcorn is needed. But that was group gone bad.
Okay, so that's a good example of group gone bad, and then it's like I'm ending this.
Yeah.
But like nowadays, if you had group members arguing or seeming like they were going to fight, what would you do?
Yeah, like, would you do that group again now? Would you give it another go?
I don't ever want anything to do with 5th grade girls in life.
Okay.
Period.
But for those of you that do, definitely do the group. I think it could work.
Yeah. Well, I think that was 12 years ago.
Yeah, I also...
You're much more skilled now. And
I'm more skilled, and also I just don't think I'm the right fit for that that particular population.
That's good to know too.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Your therapy is rated R.
Yeah.
And they're not even old enough for PG-13 movies yet, so.
No, and I think now, with the cops, they're pretty respectful to each other. I think if something like that were to happen, I'd just have to back up.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, one, I wouldn't worry about this. I think it's pretty rare and infrequent.
It is.
I think it's something you should also be able to see coming, like as things build up and escalate.
Yeah.
But I mean, first and foremost, always protect your own safety. It's like you're not responsible for getting in the middle and breaking up anything.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's two people that are larger than you, one of them's like, if you don't have a chance to intervene physically, and also like you intervene physically, there's added layers of liability there at that point. It's like, call 911. Seriously.
Yep.
Like if there's a fist fight, that's what you should do. Pull out your phone and say, I'm calling the police, because you're fighting in group therapy.
Except if it's my group, that'd be awkward.
Okay, Brad, tell me about your example though. Tell me.
That's true.
Because I know that this has happened with you.
Yeah. Well, I think Brittany's was worse, actually.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Why?
I totally forgot about it.
That's okay. But I think also to Lucas's point, this is a rare thing. In my several years of running group in treatment centers, I think I've kicked out a group member once. And then even the person who was fighting, I didn't even kick him out. He removed himself. And so, this person, they did not physically fight. They were going to. And so basically I intervened as best as I could to get them to stop and think about what they were going to do. And this was working with people who had brain injuries. And so the impulse control is very challenging for some people. And that's what was happening. And so that particular treatment center is pretty flexible and understanding and patient with a lot of things that maybe other places wouldn't be. But it was scary. I mean, again, that was my internship. And so, but I think, again, if we are present and paying attention, we'll know that some of this is coming and we need to address it. And also going back to your point, Brittany, of like, we also need to evaluate, are people appropriate for group or not? Because if we're seeing that somebody might be consistently agitated, that might be an opportunity to have individual sessions to say, like, what can we do to prepare you? Because the feedback that I'm getting or that you're getting or, whatever is showing that you're potentially not a safe person to be around. And I think, we got to consider the safety of everybody because we're responsible in that moment. And the only time I ever kicked somebody out of group was when they threatened the safety of the group and the entire facility.
Yep.
You just said something, Brad, that I don't think we've touched on, but one thing I wasn't really prepared for early on in my group facilitation days was, excuse me, after group, someone coming to me and wanting to talk about another group member.
Oh.
And it happens so much.
Frequently, yeah.
And I remember early on, I would listen to them. I would, provide feedback. And it took me a couple of years to realize that what I should have been doing was saying, that's a great thing for you to bring to group next week. You know what? Why don't you write that down? And I think you should start with that next week.
And that should always be the goal. Like whenever you find yourself in that situation, regardless, because like in a treatment setting, or like the bulk of my group therapy was when I did adolescent day treatment. It's like they're all in the same milieu. And so when there's that investment, it's like it'd be absurd to say you're not allowed to talk about other members in your group in your individual therapy or your individual relationship with a provider there. But it's really no different than, like couples therapy or family therapy. It's like you stay detriangulated. It's like you don't affirm anything. You don't, kind of push them deeper into the conflict. But everything is with the agenda to do what you need to do to support them with the goal of getting them to eventually bring that to the person in a group setting. And so just another reason why group therapy can be so powerful, especially in adolescent day treatment. One of the things that I found to be absolutely absurd about how other adolescent day treatment programs were organized in the Twin Cities was they all had a policy that the students in the program weren't allowed to socialize outside of the program. And so this was a 6 to 12 month program while they're in their prime of social development. And it's like the other kids in the program had their only opportunity to socialize, and have friendships with people.
Why would that be a rule? Like, can you?
Well, it's like one of those things where they probably never thought about it. It's just one of those things. Well, that's just what they all do, and that's how it goes. And maybe they thought it would, because they're at-risk teens, that are in day treatment, and so maybe they thought it wouldn't be good for them to hang out with you. Who knows? No, I would ask that question. Nobody ever gave me like a sufficient answer. They just deferred responsibility to whoever implemented it at one point in time. But for one, it's like all you're doing is creating a situation where these kids have to lie about hanging out with each other. And so I, of course, didn't do that. And so much good came from that because they would become best friends with somebody for 5 weeks, and then they'd have their first conflict and say, well, I'm not friends with them anymore. I'm never talking to them again, because that's their pattern of behavior. Nobody ever helped them figure out how to experience rupture and repair. But it's like, now they come back to day treatment where there's 16 other kids in the program, and they're in their process group that has 7 other kids. And so they can't hide from it. And for so many of them, group therapy was their first experience of a rupture and then repair.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful formative experience for a teenager to have, especially considering what it would have been like for them to never have that experience in a supportive therapeutic environment. But yeah, those groups would get super interesting. They were powerful. I did 2 hours of group therapy 5 days a week for 3 years. And it was all just experiential process groups. And 2 of my favorite concepts out of Yalom's book that I would see all the time is the group functioning as a social microcosm. And so what he means there is how each individual member of the group, their patterns of engagement with people outside of the therapy group will manifest in how they engage with others in the group and how others in the group experience them. And then the other one is the recapitulation of the family system. And so this is where the group facilitator comes in, because each participant in the group over time will project all of their disowned parts from their childhood onto the group facilitator. Not only that, but also their sibling position will manifest and how they relate to other members in the group based upon their sibling position. And there's so much complexity to group dynamics when you know how to pay attention to it.
So say more about like the client's kind of projecting this on the facilitator, and how to recognize it and manage that when you're also trying to deal with all of the other dynamics in the group.
So like a common one is somebody who was often disappointed by their parent. Something will come up at some point in time where they present something that suggests that you as a facilitator disappointed them. You did something, whether and sometimes they're criticizing you for not doing a good enough job to someone else in the group, or when things get kind of, when cohesion is kind of at risk in the group, they might kind of displace all blame onto you as a facilitator. And, then you just kind of manage it like you would, I would say, in any other therapy context. A lot of the times it's just, kind of exploring it with them, not, of course, taking it personally or reacting, but then get them to start thinking about other people in their lives who might have disappointed them, or, just name it. It's like, so I disappointed you.
Would you say this in the group context then?
Oh, absolutely. It's like, I'm hearing you say that I disappointed you. I appreciate you kind of presenting that to me. It's like, one thing you do is, did anybody else in the group feel disappointed by me when this happened? And that's a good way to measure whether it's transference or, have the humility to know that maybe you did do something stupid, maybe you did flop something. And so then you get to use the group as a mirror. But if everybody else in the group is like, no, I didn't really get that sense at all, then you can return it back to them or to the person, and say specifically, like, is there someone else in your life who had disappointed you, or how would you typically cope with disappointment? Or just present it to the group if you feel like the heat is too much for them. Just say, is anybody else, okay, well, it sounds like none of you were disappointed by me in that moment, but have others of you felt disappointed by somebody who is supposed to be in charge or responsible for something? And then they start to see their experience through other people.
That's powerful.
Yeah,
I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, we need to bring it back. It's just it's so hard to start one, especially like a typical encounter group, or even like specific support groups. It's like you really need to commit. Like if it's something you believe in and something you want to do, it's like partner with your other clinicians in your agency, let them know you're starting it. And you're going to have to keep reminding them of it at consults, and when you're in consult, if you hear someone presenting on a case that you think would be a good candidate for your group, say, well, have you asked them about joining this group that I do on whatever night? It's going to have to be an evening group, and find people who are passionate about it. I think the only time I did a good old-fashioned adult encounter group was the first outpatient clinic I worked at, and there's a white beard there, Charlie Greenman, who got it, because he was from that era. Because in the 60s, like all therapy was group therapy. Group therapy was like the coolest thing to do, especially in California in the 60s and 70s.
Especially with psychedelics.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, especially all sorts of things happen in group therapy up there. And it probably took us a good 5 months to get the group started. But when we got it started, it was so great. 7 adults, they all committed to it I did it for like 6 months, I want to say. And then I took a new gig to go do the day treatment program. But yeah, that work was brilliant.
Did you say already like what the purpose of that group was?
Just general encounter group.
So like, did everybody have a common goal of any kind? Like what?
Yeah, like self-improvement, relational improvement.
Yeah, I see.
So when you say general encounter group, if you look at the group as a whole, what was the group's goal?
So there's a lot of people who are just struggling, it ended up being a lot of people who would just go to therapy for years and years and years, but individual therapy wasn't really doing much for them. But they're, they're not like under-functioning individuals by any means, just kind of caught up in a trap of repetition, and how a lot of things have been going in their life. And so you put them in a group essentially just to shake things up and give them a new experience.
Sounds like psychedelic therapy would have been helpful for them.
Oh, yeah. And like psychedelic therapy will extend into group work again.
Yeah. It does. Yeah. I mean, so Intero is doing some group work. We'll talk about psychedelic therapy in a different episode too. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So it's not a lost art, and if you feel a group too, it can be profitable. So yeah, if you're interested in it, I'd definitely read Yalom's book. Frankly, it's the only book you need to read. Because it'll go through all the different types of groups too, and then just kind of take it from there. But yeah, connect with people who have experience in it, who believe in it, who have felt the power of it. Yeah.
Any other last thoughts that you guys want to add before we wrap it up?
I think having both interns and students that I've taught over the years, there are so many people that are scared of group work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can be a scary thing to think about that many clients all in one room at the same time. But it can be really powerful. And for me, it's watching the way that they support each other.
Yeah.
And using the tools that they've learned in group, and it can just be such an amazing thing. And if 14 of your clients or your agency's clients can all come together for 1 hour and all get help at the same time, you know, it really is a cool thing. So I encourage everyone to at least try it once, and maybe it's not the right fit for you, but to at least try it and see what it's like. When I teach group classes, I have an experiential component of it. And so for the first half of the semester, they're in a group.
Yeah.
And so each week they come in and I divide the class up in groups of 5 or 6, depending on the size. And they rotate who facilitates each week, but they have it for 45 minutes each week. And so it's half the class for half the semester so that they can see what it's like to both facilitate and be a participant. And you know, at least just that part of it, I think, is helpful to give them some insight. So don't knock it before you try it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really good experience, and it is powerful when you get to that cohesive point, and the group is just kind of, they're all dancing together. The feedback here, then that person, then that person. And it's really fun to experience that. And I've also had interns, and I supervised some LGSWs, and I think the other common thing that we talk about is just, and I think this is, I mean, even in individuals, a good reminder, it's okay if you don't know something. And I think that anxiety heightens more when we're talking about a group versus if it was just us, one-to-one. But I found that if I'm in front of a group of, I mean, we had lectures sometimes of 45 people, and I rarely had a co-facilitator. That was another thing you mentioned that maybe we'll have to come back and talk about. But
Co-therapy.
Yeah, it's very different. But I have found that, like, it's okay to say if I don't know something, but the part of that is you got to follow up. And so just remembering that piece, we don't have to know everything, and it is our responsibility to follow up on what we don't know. Then
it's liberating to say you don't know something, and then you get to go learn.
Right. Yep.
Well, and then you're like building trust by saying,
Exactly.
I didn't know this. I'm being honest with you, but I am going to come back to this. And then when you come back to them, that's building that trust. That's
and I'll end it there on a little shout out to Dick Schwartz, because I saw him master this better than anyone I've ever seen do it before. Internal family systems is brilliant. If you're not familiar with the model, learn it. It's like a structured method of Gestalt therapy, which, by the way, when I got to sit down next to Dick for lunch, I totally blew it by deciding I would just come after him for not giving enough credit to Gestalt therapy in his writings, and he wasn't interested.
This is your chance to redeem yourself.
But he was a keynote, and I've been to enough conferences, seen a lot of like bigger names, in the professions present, and it's so obvious when a presenter doesn't know the answer to a question, but they try to talk around it as if like they do, but they're not really saying anything that makes sense. Dick Schwartz, one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met and have seen present, he's taking questions like crazy, like tough, difficult questions, and someone threw a question out there and he just kind of paused for a moment and went, yeah, you know what? I don't know. I have no idea how to answer that question, but it's a good question, and I'll be eager to get home tonight and research it. Thank you. And just moved right on. And I was just like, yes. It's like, why doesn't everyone just do that? Yeah. It's like he just gained credibility. So
true.
It's liberating to not know things.
Well, on that note, thank you guys so much for joining the podcast and talking more about groups. And maybe we need to have a part 2 and talk more about like what's it like to facilitate it with another person, because I'm sure that does change the dynamics and make things more interesting. But thank you both so much for your time. And yeah, I'm sure you guys are both just such wonderful group facilitators. I bet it's great.
Well, I've already got an idea for a group for Brad. He's about to find out about it in about 5 minutes.
Perfect. Awesome. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.